Hi everyone, Namaste. This is Satish Kumar, practicing chartered accountant from Vijayawada. Today, I am here to analyze the provisions of section 194Q, which is dealing with deduction of TDS by a buyer on the purchase of goods vis-a-vis, which is interlocked with collection of TCS under section 206C 1H by the seller on sale of goods. Moving forward, 194Q has been introduced in budget 2021, which shall be into force from 1st July 2021, wherein I have just reproduced the extract of section 194Q from the Income Tax Department website for your analysis, wherein I'll just read out the provisions of the section 194Q first, and then we shall just interpret and analysis line by line of the entire section. Firstly, what section 194Q is speaking? Section 194Q1 says that any person being a buyer who is responsible for paying any sum to a resident hereafter in this section referred to as the seller for purchase of any goods of the value or aggregate of such value exceeding 50 lakh rupees in any previous year shall at the time of credit of such sum to the account of the seller or at the time of payment, whichever is earlier, deduct an amount equal to 0.1% of such sum exceeding 50 lakh rupees as income tax. We'll just interpret line by line what exactly it's speaking is. Firstly, what it actually says, any person being a buyer. Who is buyer? An explanation has been given in the section itself. For the purpose of this subsection, buyer means a person whose sales, gross receipts or turnover from the business carried on by him exceed 10 crore rupees during the financial year immediately preceding the financial year in which the purchase of goods is carried out, not being a person, as the central government may by notification in the official gazette specify for this purpose and subject to such conditions as may be specified therein. Here, two doubts will be arised for you. One is, sir, here it was said as exceed 10 crores during financial year immediately preceding the financial year. Now, we are in the financial year 21-22. The preceding financial year is 2021. If the turnover of the preceding financial year, that is 2021, crosses 10 crore rupees, then you are liable to deduct TDS under section 194Q. Next, number two doubt may be, sir, is GST amount inclusive of rupees 10 crore or not? For example, the total sale value is 8.5 crores excluding GST, and we presume that 2 crores is GST amount. Then 8.5 plus 2 is crossing 10 crores. Anywhere by the CBDT circular, nowhere it is mentioned that the turnover needs to be considered including GST or excluding GST. But on a conservative basis, including GST, the turnover needs to be considered. So here in my example, 10.5 crores as the turnover has been crossed more than 10 crores. Here applicability of TDS will be arisen. Hope you got this point now. Next, moving forward with this section. After buyer, who is responsible for paying any sum to resident? Resident. Here the section is talking about only resident seller. I'll just explain you this word with a small example. For example, a buyer in India is going to import any goods from outside India. That is, he is importing goods from a non-resident seller. Here, section 194Q is going to deal with only resident seller. So non-resident seller is out of the purview of section 194Q. That is, import of goods doesn't apply to section 194Q. Hope you understood this point. Next, any person being a buyer who is responsible for paying any sum to any resident for purchase of any goods. See, only the word goods has been mentioned. So only for goods. Services won't be considered for a transaction for deducting TDS under section 194Q. How much of the value or aggregate of such value exceeding 50 lakhs? If the transaction value for the entire year exceeds 50 lakh rupees, then the provisions of section 194Q will be applicable and is liable for deduction of TDS. When the TDS needs to be deducted, here it is mentioned, shall at the time of credit of such sum to the account of the seller or at the time of payment thereof by any mode, whichever is earlier. What exactly it means is, here section 2, where any sum referred to in subsection 1, this subsection 1 is credited to any account, whether called suspense account or by any other name, in the books of accounts of the person liable to pay such income. Such credit of income shall be deemed to be the credit of such income to the account of the payee, and the provisions of the section shall apply accordingly. What exactly it means is, if for suppose as a buyer I need to pay a certain amount of rupees to the seller, if I just enter the particular transaction into my books of account with the seller's name or any other name or suspense account, at that time itself TDS needs to be deducted. Or if the payment was much earlier than entry, at the time of paying the payment, you need to deduct TDS, whichever is earlier. And for more example, what I used to say, if for suppose I have given any advance amount as a buyer to a seller, then you need to deduct TDS even on that advance payment also, because payment or into the books of accounts, whichever is earlier, it was mentioned in the section. So accordingly, the TDS needs to be deducted and returns needs to be filed. How much is the TDS amount? Deduct an amount equal to 0.1%. 0.1% of such sum exceeding 50 lakh rupees. If for example 52 lakhs is a transaction for the entire year, then only on the 2 lakh rupees that 0.1 percentage of TDS needs to be deducted and should be paid to the government by filing the respective TDS returns. Then subsection 1 is completed by here along with explanation and subsection 2. And subsection 3 is a general section wherein if any difficulty arises in giving effect to the provisions of this section, the board may, with the prior approval of the central government, issue guidelines for the purpose of removing the difficulty. And subsection 4 is also a general condition wherein it was mentioned that every guideline issued by the board under subsection 3 shall, as soon as may be after it is issued, be laid before each house of the parliament and shall be binding on the income tax authorities and the person liable to deduct tax. Next, subsection 5 is the most important section of section 194Q, which is an exceptional section. The provisions of 194Q is applicable to all, but the exception is considered in subsection 5, wherein it was mentioned that the provisions of this section shall not apply to a transaction on which A and B, two exceptional limbs has been given. We'll just discuss one by one. The first exceptional limb is the provisions of this section shall not apply on which tax is deductible under any provisions of this act. What exactly it means is, I'll just go back to my previous example. As a buyer, I just imported goods from outside India. As I said as I'm importing goods from a non-resident seller, firstly section 194Q doesn't apply here, as now as the seller is non-resident. Number two is here the TDS needs to be deducted by the buyer under section 195. There is a separate section 195 for NRA payments. So as separate TDS section is being governed, 194Q is not applicable here. Hope you could understand this point. Tax is deductible under any other provisions of this act. Here, tax is being deducted under section 195 of the act. Next, the second limb. I'll just break this second limb into two parts. First, the provisions of this section shall not apply to a transaction on which tax is collectible under the provisions of section 206C. There are certain provisions which are governed under section 206C where we need to collect TCS. At that juncture, if you are going to collect TCS under section 206C, then as a buyer you need not liable to deduct TDS under section 194Q. But what is this 206C? Majorly it is being governed under 206C1, 1C, 1F and 1G. 206C1, there are certain cases under which certain percentage needs to be collected as TCS. As an example, alcoholic liquor, tendu leaves, timber obtained under forest lease, timber obtained under any mode, any other forest produce, scrap, material being coal or lignite or iron ore. These are the percentage of TCS needs to be collected under section 206C1. Moving forward, 206C1C, wherein parking lot, toll plaza or mining and quarrying agreement or contractual agreement if been entered, then 2% TCS needs to be collected under section 206C1C. Even then, in this scenario also, section 194Q doesn't apply here. Then 206C1F, wherein it speaks that if every person being a seller who receives any amount as consideration for sale of motor vehicle of a value exceeding 10 lakh rupees shall, at the time of receipt of such sum, collect from the buyer a sum equal to 1% for the sale consideration as income tax. If I am going to sell any motor vehicle and the value is exceeding 10 lakh rupees, then you are liable to collect TCS at the rate of 1%. Then also 194Q is not applicable there also. And the recent provision is 206C1G, wherein under liberalized remittance scheme LRS, if any remittance is made to a foreign and if such a remittance is over and above 7 lakh rupees per year, then the authorized dealer, that is a bank or any other authorized dealer, needs to collect TCS at the rate of 5% from the remitter with respect to this LRS transaction. So under this 206C1, 1C, 1F, 1G, if TCS is applicable, then 194Q TDS is not applicable. Hope you could understand this point. Now, if we just go into the second part of the second exception limb, we'll just go again. Here, what it says exactly is the provisions of this section shall not apply to a transaction on which tax is collectible under the provisions of section 206C other than a transaction to which subsection 1H of 206C applies. Here shall not apply, which is negative. Other than is also negative. Negative and negative becomes positive. That means that 194Q and 206C1H won't be simultaneously applicable to the same transaction. Then, what is the order? If for suppose the buyer deducts TDS under section 194Q, then the seller need not collect TCS, or if the seller collects TCS, is the buyer not liable to deduct TDS? Okay, let me explain. Before you letting you explain, I just want to go with a thorough analysis of section 206C 1H, which has been introduced in budget 2020 from 1st October 2020, wherein it speaks that every person being a seller who receives any amount as consideration for sale of goods of the value or aggregate of the value exceeding 50 lakh rupees in any previous year, here also the same provision, in any year other than the goods being exported out of India or goods converted in section 1, 1F, 1G, which we have discussed earlier, shall at the time of receipt, what we discussed in 194Q, at the time of making entries in the books of accounts or at the time of making the payment, whichever is earlier, TDS needs to be deducted. Here under TCS 206C1H, at the time of receipt of such amount from the buyer, you need to collect 0.1% of the sale consideration exceeding 50 lakh rupees as income tax. And the same provision, who is a buyer and who is the seller the previous year, preceding financial year, more than 10 crores. The same which we have discussed in 194Q, here also the same turnover deduction applicable here. But here I have come to this 206C1H to explain the second exception of the 194Q. Here it was clearly mentioned as a proviso to 206C1H, wherein provided further that the provisions of this subsection shall not apply if the buyer is liable to deduct TDS under any other provisions of the Act on the goods purchased by him from the seller and has deducted such amount. So it was clearly mentioned in section 206C1H as a proviso. If TDS is deducted, then you are not liable to collect TCS under section 206C1H. So the order is, if 194Q is applicable to the buyer, then you should deduct TDS. You should not collect TCS as a seller. The first priority. So there is an overriding effect by 194Q over 206C1H. So both the sections are not simultaneously applicable. We'll just go with a detailed illustrative case laws for more exact understanding of both 194Q and 206C1H provisions. Here, for your better understanding, I have just listed out some illustrative cases wherein the first scenario, these are all illustrations, these are all examples. In the first scenario, if the buyer's turnover is more than 11 crores, that is more than 10 crores, that is 11 crores, and seller's turnover is 9 crores, that is less than 10 crores, and the transaction value is 60 lakhs, that is more than 50 lakhs. Then, as the buyer's turnover is more than 10 crores, 194Q is applicable, then the buyer is liable to deduct TDS. In the second scenario, the buyer's turnover is 9 crores, that is less than 10 crores, and seller's turnover is 11 crores, that is more than 10 crores, and the transaction value is 60 lakhs. So obviously, as seller's turnover is crossing the threshold and the buyer's turnover is less than the threshold, you as a seller, you need to collect TCS under section 206C1H. The third scenario, the most important scenario, for you to get a better understanding. The buyer's turnover is 11 crores, that is more than 10 crores, and the seller's turnover is also 11 crores, that is more than 10 crores, and the transaction value is more than 50 lakhs, that is 60 lakhs. Then, as we have discussed, here 194Q is coming into, TDS is coming into picture, TCS is also coming into picture. Then, here there is a proviso to TCS that if TDS is applicable, then TCS under 206C1H is not applicable. So, under this scenario, TDS under section 194Q is mandatory to be deducted by the buyer for purchase of goods. The fourth scenario, The buyer's turnover is less than 10 crores, that is 9 crores. The seller's turnover is less than 10 crores, that is 9 crores. Then transaction value 60 lakhs. Though the transaction value is more than 50 lakhs, as buyer's turnover and the seller's turnover is not crossing the threshold turnover, no sections are applicable here. And the same situation comes in the next case, illustrative case also. Though the buyer's turnover is more than 10 crores and seller's turnover is more than 10 crores, as the transaction value is less than 50 lakhs, that is here only 40 lakhs, then also both the sections are not applicable. That is both 194Q is not applicable as a TDS, and TCS under section 206C1H is also not applicable here. Okay, sir, you have just explained with an illustration. Good. But how do as a seller, how do you know that your buyer is going to cross the threshold and you need not collect TCS? And as a buyer, how will you know that your seller will collect TCS? For that, you need to take a declaration from both buyer and the seller, as the case may be, which needs to keep in the records. It is just for your record purpose, which needs to be kept in your file. And such a declaration can be shown to the department why the TDS or TCS has not been collected or deducted, as the case may be. Here, it is a format of declaration letter. This format is not given by the income tax department, but is a general format. If taken, it will be advantageous to the buyer or seller, as the case may be. Here, the declaration letter to be sent by the buyer to seller, if his turnover is more than 10 crores, the buyer himself, he knows that his turnover is more than 10 crores, then he will give a declaration to the seller that his turnover is already more than 10 crores, as a declaration addressing to the seller with name, address and PAN. It is to hereby inform you that our total sales, gross receipts or turnover from the business exceed rupees 10 crores during 2021. Yes, we are in 21-22. The previous year is 2021, and therefore we are liable to deduct TDS as per the new section 194Q on purchase made by us. The provision is applicable from 1st July 2021. Accordingly, you are requested to not collect TCS under section 206C1H. So buyer is asking for a declaration from the seller that his turnover is exceeding the threshold and 194Q TDS is applicable for him. So he is requesting the seller, he is asking the seller that you need not collect TCS under section 206C1H. This is one declaration given by the buyer to the seller if his turnover is more than 10 crores. But there may be a chance that the seller's turnover is more than 10 crores, but we don't know which buyer turnover is more than 10 crores and who gets attracted with section 194 TDS reduction. Then as a seller, you need to send a declaration letter to buyer if the turnover is more than 10 crores, addressing to the buyer that as per the newly inserted section 194Q of the Income Tax Act, is liable to deduct TDS at the same time on supply made by us to you. We are also required to collect tax under section 206C1H. True. However, there cannot be two taxes on the same transaction, which we have discussed, that there shouldn't be two taxes on the same transaction. Therefore, we, with the name, address and PAN number, hereby request your confirmation. It's a confirmation declaration that whether you are liable to deduct TDS under section 194Q or not on purchase made by you from us. Please choose from the below options and let us know. This is a format which we have designed, wherein we confirm that we are liable to deduct TDS. If this is the case, you will select this option. If not, we need to select, we confirm that we are not liable to deduct TDS on purchase made by us from 194Q. Please note that if you don't receive any reply within a week, then our accounts department will collect TCS under section 206C1H. This is a declaration format which need to be taken from the buyer or the seller, as the case may be, which we have discussed, and should be kept in the records, so that when the department asks why though TDS provisions are applicable or though TCS provisions are applicable to you, why you have not deducted or collected. Then you can show, sir, this is the declaration which was given by the buyer or the seller. So accordingly, I didn't comply with those provisions. So there ends our liability. I hope you could understand what exactly the provisions of 194Q and 206C1H, and where exactly this 194Q TDS is applicable to a buyer, and where exactly a seller needs to collect TCS under section 206C1H. And for any other queries, you're all welcome to just ping me up with these contact details, or you can just mail me, so that I am very happy to answer your queries. And I wish all of you to stay safe and stay at home and be healthy. Bye bye. Thank you.